Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome here to downtown Foggy Bottom, the George Washington University, the Elliott School for International Affairs, and the Seeger Center for Asian Studies. It's a beautiful day out, so thank you very much for joining us here. I am Eric Schlüssel, a professor of history and international affairs, and I have the great honor of being the director of the Seeger Center for Asian Studies. The Seeger Center is a comprehensive Asian Studies center which serves the entire university, the DC area, and our greater community. But of course, if you look out the window, you see very familiar buildings, and consequently, we have a long-standing interest in policy studies. Thanks to that, and also thanks to our vibrant programming on Taiwan, the Seeger Center is the largest and most active Asian Studies center in the Washington, D.C. area, and one of the top 10 in America. So thank you for being part of our community. The turnout here today is wonderful, and I'm really glad to see so many faces. The Taiwan Roundtable is one of our signature events. We are very proud to be a great center for Taiwan studies here in Washington, D.C., one of the leading ones in the US. And I think there's something particularly wonderful about having programming about a country that is not always regarded on its own terms. Programming that can view it from multiple angles, not simply political, but scholarly. Programming that centers Taiwanese voices on the Taiwanese experience, and then that opens that set of perspectives and conversations up both to our students, our community members, and to policymakers here in DC. So we are extremely proud to be able to host this event, and grateful for you for joining us today. On those notes, I will turn this over to my assistant director, Richard Haddock, who plays a key role in our Taiwan education and program, and who will be chairing the roundtable today. Richard, take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Haddock. I'm the Assistant Director for Seeger Center for Asian Studies, as well as the co-director of our very own Taiwan Education and Research Program. My background's in Taiwan affairs, in particular, Taiwan's digital democracy development and efforts, as well as U.S.-Taiwan relations. The Taiwan Roundtable is part of a long-standing public forum series that the Seeger Center hosts regularly every year that explores, highlights, and debates salient issues in Taiwan affairs. And it really reflects the role of the Seeger Center as an intellectual crossroads between research and policy studies. Before continuing with the event, I also want to give just a special thank you to the folks that helped make this event possible, our staff and our student support. So we have Adam Bubinich, Mark Sheehan, our fellows from the Taiwan Education and Research Program, Fiona Stokes and Kyle Wen, as well as Bobby Kincaid and David Fung. Thank you all so much for your help in making events like this possible. So for today's event, Taiwan's legislative yuan has long been characterized by intense partisan competition, high-stakes negotiations, and at times dramatic confrontations, including fistfights, blockage of meeting rooms, and legislators climbing on top of one another to reach the podium. Recent legislative crises, including the controversial cuts to the budget and freezes to operating budgets of several ministries and offices, have highlighted the complex interplay between budgetary politics, institutional constraints, and evolving party dynamics, raising critical questions about the resilience and functionality of Taiwan's democratic system and constitutional order. According to the Taiwan Fact Check Center, the Legislative Yuan submitted its budget to the central government with a 6.6% cut, the steepest budget drop in recent years, and also amidst a government revenue surplus from previous years. The specific character of cuts has been complicated to navigate, but cuts have been made generally to the government's general operating expenses, military equipment and facilities, academic research, media promotion, campaigns for international diplomacy, and spending freezes across government branches. At the same time, civil society groups, open government advocates, and civic tech communities in Taiwan have played active roles in developing participatory mechanisms and transparency tools meant to enhance public engagement and citizen oversight in legislative affairs. Some civic groups have also mobilized dissatisfied voters to organize campaigns to recall legislators and public officials. By my count, as of last week, 20 recall petitions have passed first reading, while another 64 were submitted later in last week. Current legislative dilemma is at the center of a crisis of democracy, institutional resilience, and constitutional procedure. This is all happening during a highly dynamic moment of geopolitical and geoeconomic shifts concerning Taiwan, connected in part to the actions and reactions of the current Trump administration. To address these timely and salient topics, we have assembled and will learn from a panel of leading experts and practitioners to analyze the roots and ramifications of Taiwan's ongoing legislative turbulence. So, for our event layout, we have our three speakers here who will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes on different topics. Speakers will come up here, present their slides, and after each of the speakers have given their presentations, we will join the audience for a Q&A session to talk further about the topics at hand. I will first introduce all the speakers and then call each of them in turn to come up to the front to speak. So first, we have Thomas J. Shattuck, Senior Program Manager at the University of Pennsylvania's Perry World House. He is a 2024-2025 non-resident WSD Honda Fellow at the Pacific Forum, a 2024 to 2025 non-resident research fellow at the Modern War Institute at West Point, and a 2025 fellow with atomic anxiety in the new nuclear age. His research focuses on cross-strait relations, Taiwanese and Chinese domestic and foreign affairs, Taiwan's semiconductor industry, and the U.S. role in the Indo-Pacific. Shattuck is also a non-resident research fellow at the Global Taiwan Institute, non-resident fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, member of Foreign Policy for America's Next Gen Foreign Policy Initiative, and the Pacific Forum's Young Leaders Program, where he participated in the 2022 U.S.-Philippines Next Gen Leaders in Security Initiative. Thomas will be giving us an overview of the legislative and constitutional situation, as well as implications for diplomacy and foreign policy. After him, we will welcome Ipa Cho to speak, who is a co-founder of GovZero.tw, a civic tech community in Taiwan starting from 2012. She is a writer and a documentary director. She focuses on citizen engagement and public participation for the past 12 years, with the GovZero community, which promotes online collaboration through open source culture between civil society and public sectors. She just published her second book at the end of 2024, which is about her father, a preeminent sociologist, and the intellectual community during Taiwan's democratization process in the 1990s. Ipa will talk about citizen and GovZero initiatives that address legislative openness and transparency. And finally, we will have Dr. Wei-Ping Li, who is a research fellow at the Taiwan Fact Check Center and a postdoctoral researcher at the Philip Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. Dr. Li holds a PhD degree from the Philip Merrill College of Journalism and an LLM degree from the University of Pennsylvania's Law School. Her research focuses on disinformation, fact-checking, social media content moderation, and privacy issues in the digital era. Dr. Li is admitted to the practice of law in New York State, and she will be talking about the mis and disinformation surrounding the current legislative crisis, as well as the general state of Taiwan's information ecosystem. So please join me in welcoming our speakers, and we'll start with Thomas.
First, I want to say thank you to Richard and Eric for the invitation to come, and thank you to Adam and Mark for helping me actually get here. It's been a while since I've been, I guess, south of the Mason-Dixon line in DC. It's a very different place than it was last spring when I was here. Happy to be here today at the Seeger Center to talk about a constitutional crisis. So I will try to be a little more vague than Richard in my opening remarks, but I'm going to paint a story that sounds a little familiar, maybe unfamiliar. The executive branch in a specific country is facing significant budget cuts, affecting the ability of that government to actually function. Some of those cuts are quite significant. There's also deep political polarization between two main political parties, creating an impasse in the ability to effectively govern. There's also a leading political figure in this country that has faced corruption charges and other legal troubles. I'm not talking about the United States. I'm talking about Taiwan. But you can see how very similar what has been going on in Taiwan is over the last several months is what's now been going on in the United States over the last two. So I will be talking about what has been going on in Taiwan since essentially President Lai was elected and inaugurated, but kind of fast forwarding to about the last couple months when all of these things have happened. I'm going to focus on three main points: changes to the Constitutional Court, the shift in the revenue sharing formula between the central and local governments, and budget cuts across the board in the various ministries. So to summarize these three main points, the Legislative Yuan recently passed a law that mandates the Constitutional Court in Taiwan to have a 2/3 quorum out of its 15 members to hear a case. After passing the law, the KMT-TPP alliance voted down every single nominee that the Lai administration had put forward for the Constitutional Court, which means the Constitutional Court does not have the ability to operate because it lacks that 2/3 number. I believe there are 8 of the 15 currently sitting, so it's not really close. It's about 50%. Nevertheless, even though this law was passed, the Executive Yuan has asked the Constitutional Court to review the constitutionality of some of these laws. I'll get into that mess later. The second point is the central government, local governments, before the recent passage of the laws, had a 75-25 split in the tax revenues and other streams of income, where 75% of it would go to the main central government and 25% would go to the local governments. The local governments are primarily controlled by KMT party officials in the various counties. Recently, the law that the LY passed shifted that from 75-25 to 60% to 40%. Now, that seems like a huge and drastic shift, but it is worth noting that before 1999, that was the number. The number before 1999 was the 60-40 split, and then it was changed to go 75-25 before 2000, and now it's back. So the circumstances of the obvious shift have changed. It is much more political than it was before, but noting that shift will have an impact on point 3, which is, again, the KMT-TPP alliance in the Legislative Yuan passed a budget that amounts, as Richard said, to a budget cut of slightly under 7%, about 6.6. And the Legislative Yuan has the ability to cut or freeze any budget item. It does not have the authority to increase a budget item. Only the EY, Executive Yuan, has the ability to ask for more money. And they can submit any sort of budget, and then the Legislative Yuan can decide what to do with that. And that's essentially what happened, was a budget was submitted and things were carved up. A key point that makes it different from Taipei and Washington is generally if a budget of any kind was passed in US Congress, the president has the authority to veto it, and that veto has to be of a supermajority. That's not the case in Taiwan. The Executive Yuan has the ability to ask the LY to just reconsider a bill, and the reconsideration only needs to get one more than the majority. So it needs a majority, a simple majority, to overcome a veto, which is what is the situation now in Taipei. They're between the KMT aligned independents, and the TPP. They have more than enough to basically get past any of these veto/reconsideration requests. So whenever President Lai and the Executive Yuan are unhappy with something passed in the EY, they really don't have any means of formally vetoing this because of the veto-proof power that the KMT and the TPP have. So the other thing that they have the ability to do is send these things to the Constitutional Court for interpretation. And that is what happened late last year when a lot of controversial bills were passed about forcing the executive, President Lai, to give a State of the Union and answer questions. Those bills were struck down by the Constitutional Court. So if you're the KMT and the TPP and these laws are being struck down by the court and you really want these things to get passed, what do you do next? You go after the court. So what does all of this mean? As I said, the veto-proof majority will remain, but I'll get into some possibilities for how to overcome that later. And the main reason that this veto-proof majority exists is the Taiwan People's Party has decided to align itself with the KMT. And you're wondering, well, why would that be after what we all know was the very embarrassing collapse of the president-vice presidential joint ticket in the lead up to the election in an effort to make it a two-person race or a two-party race versus a three-party race? You think that would be a reason to not align yourselves with the KMT. That didn't happen. And now because of what's the legal issues that Ko and Ja is facing, the Taiwan People's Party is almost essentially voting with the KMT on a lot of these controversial things. When I was in Taipei in May around the inauguration last year, the TPP made it clear that they wanted to function as a swing party where they would vote with the KMT on things that they thought were important and vote for the DPP on things that they thought were important that the DPP was pushing. I haven't seen that happen. And it's only gotten worse, and because they believe that the executive and the courts are going after their party leader. So the possibilities of the TPP cooperating with the DPP have essentially shattered, even though I really don't buy the fact that they ever existed. I haven't seen much evidence of that. So now getting into the nitty gritty of the budgets, I talked a bit about like the EY can draft a budget if it so chooses, and the LY can pass that budget. It can cut things from that budget. It can freeze things from that budget, but it cannot increase the budget. Only the EY can do that. The change in the revenue stream from 75 to 25 to 60-40 has resulted in a huge problem when you add that to the budget cut. So overall, about 6.6% of the budget was cut from the executive Yuan, which is about slightly over 200 billion new Taiwan dollars or 6.3 billion US dollars from the central government budget. And that's not really just 6% because we have the 60-40 change. So you have to account for that drop in 15% that also was essentially cut from the budget before the cuts to the budget were initiated. So Premier Cho says that's actually really of the total budget, 16%. But when you consider statutory expenses like people's salaries, pensions, those sorts of things, President Lai said it's actually tantamount to about 35% of your budget being cut. So going from previous years under Tsai Ing-wen, budget cuts from the executive Yuan floated around 1, 1.5, maybe 1.1, never really got above 2%. So we're going from about a 1% cut to what is essentially a 35% cut in your budget, which when you're a government, and we're finding that out outside of this building, how much damage can be done with that. Now I'm going to swing over to what has actually been cut. The Ministry of Defense has been hit, and I understand kind of why that is. The defense of Taiwan is a very political issue in Taiwan. It's a very political issue in the Indo-Pacific. It's a very political issue in the United States. So the Ministry of Defense was a target. And overall, about 30% of the entire budget was frozen. But frozen does not mean cut. Frozen means they could possibly get some of that back. And these are not all of the things that were cut. I'm going to say that out front. The next slide for the rest of the ministries is even longer. But this just gives you a flavor of what's actually happening in Taipei right now. So 15% off the top was cut for international exchange and travel, which prevents members of the Ministry of Defense and also members of Taiwan's military from going and doing international exchange abroad, which could include coming to the United States, talking with defense people here, or going to conferences, things like that. 15% of that is cut. Doesn't seem like a big number, but considering how Taiwan's diplomacy in MOFA and MND is conducted, face-to-face exchanges are very important because when you get those opportunities, you take them, because Taiwan, up until recently, has had a lot of difficulty getting face-to-face time, especially when it comes to military officials. That has been a bit of a red line for some countries. One thing that was a very big deal, 30% of the budget for a new drone training facility was cut, where various companies were coming together to help develop and train drones to develop Taiwan's asymmetric capabilities. So 30% of that's just been cut off the board. So that is a huge issue for that facility to even come online. As Richard said, operational expenses, and for the MND, that's ammo, fuel, spare parts, the things that Taiwan needs to keep its planes flying in the air, and bullets in the guns, ships in the water, that sort of thing. And the next point is not unique particularly to the MND. Every ministry has faced a 60% cut for its ability to buy ads. So for the MND, that's putting out an ad to try to recruit people. For the Ministry of Culture, that could just be ads about some sort of new thing that they're doing in a museum. Another issue with the 60% cut is there's limitations on how much one ministry can spend in one news organization or one company. So you really have to essentially spread out these ads, which makes it much more complicated and time consuming. When your budget's already cut 60%, it's taking up more time. Time is money. So the ability for any ministry to really get its message out has been significantly curtailed. And then the big one, which has only been frozen, is Taiwan's domestic submarine program. 50% of the budget of that program has been frozen, but they have been clear that it's been frozen until the submarine that's been finished passes its initial tests. And allegedly, once all those tests are passed, that 50% will go back. I personally don't think that that's actually going to happen because the submarine program is a bit of a very, very political issue on what is the utility of having a couple of submarines in the Taiwan Strait in the Western Pacific when you're facing a very asymmetric type of warfare. So we'll see if the submarines pass their tests and if they get that budget back. Again, this is another snippet of everything else that has been going on with these cuts. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 50% has been cut or frozen. That includes the 60% cut in advertisements. The Ministry of Digital Affairs, 40% cut. NCC, 50% cut. Mainland Affairs, 30% cut plus 20% frozen. The unfortunately funny part of the Mainland Affairs Council debate was it originally was proposed to just have a budget of $1 new Taiwan dollar, and that was quickly changed. But that just shows you how some of the people advocating for these budget cuts view the DPP's EY efforts, particularly when it comes to exchange or an attempt to talk to the PRC, was that you can do that with $1. Ministry of Culture, 15%. The Control Yuan is almost completely wiped out with 96% of its budget cut. The Presidential Office operating budget, 73% frozen. The National Science and Technology Council, 70%. And it also about 200 billion new Taiwan dollars have been overall frozen. So from these numbers, you can see that certain things with the budget cuts have no ability to function. 70% of something getting wiped out when you're not really allowed to cut out the pensions and the staff and the salaries, you don't really have much wiggle room. So what does all of this mean for Taiwan itself? Well, I don't really like to cite public opinion in Taiwan because it is so fickle, but I'm going to do it anyway. The TPP and the KMT have a majority of a dissatisfaction rate. This was a recent survey done, and the DPP is the only one that is slightly above water, but none of them have a 50% satisfaction rate. What does that actually mean? Because you would see Tsai Ing-wen having really low approval ratings, and then they jump back up and go back down. But when it comes to members of the legislative Yuan, there's actually things people can do about it. And I'll get into that in another slide. Actually, I'll get into it right now. As Richard said, there's a recall campaign. And also, while the recall campaign is going on, there is the possibility that the recall laws will change to make it harder to recall the people that are afraid of being recalled because of the things that have been going on. In the last week, the recall campaign for 19 KMT members of the legislative Yuan passed their initial review. They have to pass a second review before then going on to an actual recall vote. 9 campaigns, all against DPP LY members, all failed their initial review because the shocking thing happened that a lot of dead people actually signed those petitions, and no one knows how all those dead people signed it to even get on the campaign. So the KMT is potentially facing 19 members of its LY caucus being recalled. I don't think all 19 are going to get to the actual vote. And of that, I don't think all of them will actually pass. But in the worst case scenario for the KMT, they may lose their majority in the DPP if the KMT members actually get recalled and DPP members are able to take any seats. They will lose that majority and all of these budget issues will go away. But for that to happen, the DPP would need to be able to get enough members voted in that exceeds the number of the KMT TPP alliance, which I think is very unlikely. But if none of them can really get any sort of consensus on issues and it's around the 50% mark, we may see the TPP swing over, or we may see some compromise on issues, but I don't really think that will happen. That's why I said it may happen. But there is an impending constitutional crisis in Taiwan. The executive Yuan has its budget so hobbled that it is very difficult for some ministries to even function. The Constitutional Court technically can't do anything until nominees are passed, and the legislative Yuan, given the current setup between the KMT and the TPP, have the ability to pass anything they want. There's also a huge issue with defense preparedness, where when the MND is getting key things cut and frozen at a time when the United States and the Trump administration are expecting Taiwan to spend a lot more on defense than it already has, even before these cuts were made, then that sends a message from Taipei to Washington that maybe Taipei is actually not as serious as Washington would like it to be about its own defense. And we know, based on things that have been going on in DC, the defense of Taiwan with people staffing the Trump administration is a very important issue. So if the message coming from Taiwan is actually we're going to cut some of our Ministry of Defense budget, it's not a big deal. What do you do if you're Washington and your Taipei is not funding its MND to a level that you deem acceptable? If you're Trump, do you send troops to potentially die to defend Taiwan in the event of an invasion? There we go. The global implications of this are we saw that happen last week. Right, I think as Richard was talking, Zelensky came out and said he'd actually be in favor of a partial ceasefire deal after Trump announced the ceasing of all military aid. But if you are Taiwan, you do not want to be a defense target right now when the NATO alliance is at stake. Ukraine would go either way. And if you're Xi Jinping and you wake up and you see all of these things going on, do you think that Trump, given what's going on in Taiwan, will actually do the things that, say, Joe Biden promised at least 4 to 6 times? That yes, under Joe Biden, we would defend Taiwan. Do you think that Trump would do that given everything that's been going on in Taipei? At the moment, I don't think so. So does that force the DPP to try to find some sort of way to interact with Beijing and calm tensions, reduce any sort of military excursions that may happen? I don't think that's likely because at the moment it seems like Beijing can just sit and wait and watch all of these Western-led alliances and partnerships crumble. And then China can either go in and be the good partner, or if it is the case of Taiwan, actually be much more forceful in the military space. So in Taipei, here are the things that I think that actually could happen. Despite not having the now legal quorum passed by the LY, the Constitutional Court could still act and invalidate those laws despite those restrictions. And then the LY could go ahead and continue to do this. And we're in a legislative constitutional court clash. That is one outcome. The other outcome is the Constitutional Court does not act at all until we get a quorum passed by the LY. If that is what happens, then we'll likely see compromise candidates put forth by the DPP that are possibly tasteful to the KMT or the TPP. But if you are one of those parties, why would you do that, given that those people are then in those positions essentially possibly for the duration of the Lai administration for the next 4 to 8 years? So right now, the KMT and the TPP don't really have an incentive to cooperate. And for them, it's in their best interest to have the Constitutional Court essentially not be able to function. Given that, the EY will now need to decide what should it do given the staggering budget cuts. What do you prioritize when 30 to 70 to 96% of the various ministry budgets are cut? That is a lot of tough conversations that will need to be had, similar to what is going on here in Washington, except the numbers are much more staggering in Taipei. The other outcome could be that a lot of members of the KMT and the legislative Yuan are successfully recalled, and that could change a lot of everything that we're just saying. But there are a lot of issues with how Taiwan's Constitutional Court may move forward, given the cuts and everything going on. So with all this in mind, I don't really have a positive thing to end on. Unfortunately, there's just, you all live in DC, you see it much more frequently than I do up in Philadelphia. It's dire in Taipei, it's dire in Washington. There are ways out of this, but it would require 3 political parties that don't have aligning views to communicate with each other. But in Taipei, with the split government, it doesn't seem like that will actually be the case. So, with that, I'll end my presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for that deep dive into what's going on, and including some specifics of the numbers of cuts being thrown around. And even though it's ending on a more pessimistic note, hopefully our conversations here can also find new points of debate here. So next up, I'd like to invite Ipa Cheo onto the stage.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. And because I'm talking about digital civic engagement, so I have my iPad and they have papers. That's the big difference. So thank you for having me to join the DC community to share civic tech movement in Taiwan. First thing first, I'd like to know if anyone have heard of GovZero from Taiwan. Raise your hand. Oh, okay. And some of you haven't heard of it, so that's why I'm here. So besides the legal limits of Taiwan discussed by Thomas, I'm going to give you some maybe more optimistic view. I don't know. It's a chaotic time. So I'm Ipa. I'm Xu Xiaowei Chu, also go by Ipa. So I'm a co-founder of GovZero community, and I'm also published my second book in January. This book title is 访父记. It's interview with the father. It's an inspiration from Interview with a Vampire. I have a complex with my father. So I use the mouse here. Okay. Oh. So I have to read my notes and microphone and everything. I just use the key. So the book is about my father, who is a sociologist, and as an intellectual in the 90s, he worked with his colleagues and civil allies to advance democratic reforms. So during my writing process, that's my father with gray hair, like myself. So during the writing process, I discovered that democracy's progress relies on various technologies, including newspaper, broadcasting, internet, and so on. And of course, we're still on this path. So what's the crisis we're facing in 2025? I believe Thomas gave us a very clear view of what we're facing in Taiwan. So after 2024 president election, despite the DPP winning the presidency, Taiwan found itself in political situation where the ruling party hosts the minority and where the opposition holds the majority in parliament. So this year, KMT-TPP alliance has significantly slashed the central government budget. And other than that, meanwhile, China's military drills continue, and Taiwan's undersea cable was being cut recently, frequently. And so there's pressure within the legislator Yuan, and we have pressure, tension from the mainland China at the same time. So this is a recent report from the reporter in Taiwan. So my main topic for today is what the civil society has been doing and what can we do for now or from now. Starting last year, this is Bluebird movement. So Taiwan civil society launched a series of Bluebird movement from the street. So to protest against Taiwan's China's influence. So it's decentralized mobilization and it's bottom-up movement. So amid the backlash to the KMT and TPP alliance cuts to the budget, recall petitions for 19 legislators have passed I think it's just last week for the first stage of signature collection this week. However, the large-scale recall has become a highly confrontational movement, political movement. And whether it can mobilize swing voters is the key to this factor. So it's very emotionally motivated in this movement. So this is when I believe is when civic tech comes in. So the civic tech community, GovZero, this is 4 of the parliament hackathons we've held for the past 6 months. So the civic community GovZero, one of the key contributors, Ronnie Wang, who organized a series of parliamentary hackathons, bring together media professionals and parliamentary watchdog NGOs to gain clear understanding of what was happening in the legislators, because it's really very chaotic. And I would like to explain the efforts by open source, open data, open government activists during this time. Because I work as a documentary filmmaker, so I have a lot of slides, so you can have a sense of what's happening at the scene. So from 2021 to 2024, Taiwan's legislative Yuan collaborated with civil society to promote an open parliament action plan by adopting United Nations standards. They or kind of we advanced the open data infrastructure in the legislative yuan. So Taiwan's progress in data infrastructure basically is considered top tier internationally. But this action was stopped after KMT take majority in the legislative yuan. And many of the key members are from GovZero community. So, but can this help to resolve the parliamentary conflict? I don't know. So let's see. So based on the understanding of data from the activists of open data movement, GovZero participants reasonably held hackathons, hacking with hackathons, hacking the data from legislator yuan, following the legislative conflict. So this narrative behind this action is like, aside from initiating recalls, what else we can do as a civil participants, as citizens. So many came. This is a photo from last year. So it's still going on. This is my laptop. I participated in one of the hackathons in Bay Area. I'm now based in Bay Area. So and because cutting the budget has also become a part of cognitive warfare. Many people held differing views, gaining the understanding the real situation through data has itself become a form of cognitive action, because some people would think that they're not cutting enough. People from different parties have very different views. So I spent one afternoon looking at the data with Bay Area community, and we found out that it is really chaotic. You can see there's some budget being cut and frozen at the same time, and they appeared in 3 very similar proposals. So because the data is open, so it is easier to collaborate with media outlets that is also used open licensing models. So this is the outlet from Taiwan's Reader. So Reader has worked with open source community like civic tech community to launch a budget proposal query system. So you can look up the data and conduct a basic view, just like I did last month. It becomes clear that the legislative process is very chaotic. And I think LY submitted the budget to EY last week, and they didn't put on the specific final budget in the proposal because they cannot calculate what they have been cut. This is the first time in Taiwan history to have a budget submitted to EY like that. And there are more advanced geeky tools developed by the hackathons community, like they have this AI transcription, revision, record of bills, and very clean open data, etc. But I'll stop here for the two geeky parts of this movement. Let's go back to what we can think about this conflict. So in summary, we believe, or I believe, every participant, including citizen, including civic technology, media, and social movement, and scholar, and political activism, are very important and need to be interconnected. So I say in Taiwan over the past 13 years, GovZero community have formed a collaborative ecosystem for participants to connect in Taiwan. People come to know each other in GovZero hackathons, but things change. However, civic tech influence is also on the decline because somehow now emotional mobilization seems more effective. So sense and sensibility is a relentless circle, I believe. But at the same time, technology and democracy often appear together in history. So if we look back on the core concept of civic tech, so let's take a moment to revisit the core concept of civic tech movement and think about what we can do from now. I say it's civic tech or open source movement is to participate in public issues is originated from the US. But in Taiwan, it has become a new organism. So GovZero community is a volunteer-based community. It's a group of people using technological and collaborative approach to engage in society. So it is a public participation version of open source movement. So that is what I've been thinking. It's a new slide I've made just yesterday because I talked about what is digital democracy and what is civic tech with Richard just a couple of days ago. So this is a very simple diagram illustrating civil society and the government. And when we add tech into it, it becomes civic tech and gov tech. And so civic tech provides some features such as facilitate participation, provide transparency, and maybe in the future, it can exist crowd decision making, but because it cannot do that at this moment. And what does that mean? What does this feature mean? It means, in other words, it strengthens democracy through digital means. But of course, we can do it without technology. So, but on the other hand, if the government, with or without tech, block participation, provide no transparency, and offer no opportunities for public involvement in decision making, it might lead to some kind of dictatorship, whether it's digital or not. So what the civil society can do to maintain participation and transparency using a variety of methods, not just include digital means, is what we can think of doing now. It's sort of more optimistic, but I'm not sure it's useful. Of course, we have to, for an open source community, we have to keep doing that. Why? In these days, I keep asking myself why we're doing these. Because I believe it's a democratic way of life, and democracy possess strong self-correcting mechanism, but democracy is not easy. So even under extreme circumstances, I think I'm just hoping we can work together to reach the better goal. I believe it's meaningful discussion is the key to solve problems. Meaningful discussion require information infrastructure, and that's what GovZero community keep trying to build. Therefore, a spirit of openness, and hands-on participation and public awareness remain the key factors motivating many people to join the community. I used to say that we have to build an ecosystem to solve problems collaboratively. So we used to work as centralized structure to decentralized network, or decentralized like a network, and then we can go into distributed networks. But now I would like to zoom a little bit out. Sometimes we can see crisis because I'm from Taiwan, so we have typhoon, earthquake, and China and everything like that. So that is, maybe we can think reversely. Sometimes a crisis serves as a catalyst. Threats might help to initiate collaboration. So sometimes we think we have to do this, but sometimes crises make us to collaborate even more tightly. For you, in the US, you have different crises now. Yeah, so that is for us. I believe we built this network through all the Chinese influence for the last 12 to or 40 years, maybe. So at the end of this short presentation, let me quote a political philosopher, Tocqueville. This is quote in my book as well, but it's originally in English. So I'll read it for all of you to end this short presentation. In democratic peoples, on the contrary, all citizens are independent and weak. They can do almost nothing by themselves, and none of them can oblige those like themselves to lend their cooperation. They, therefore, all fall into impotence if they do not learn to aid each other freely. So the message is we have to learn and to aid each other freely. And this talk is for my kid as well. They're 9 and 7. They're at the Zoo of Washington today. So maybe some of you will meet them afterwards. So this is for our generation and next generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ipa, for reminding us about the power, really, of one power of democracy, which is the importance of civil society strength and for people to gather together in free association. And also very interesting points, too, about kind of how the budget cuts relate to cognitive warfare domestically or in other political situations as well. And I think we have more to discuss how technology and democracy are and have been co-evolving in Taiwan and elsewhere. So for our last speaker, we're going to have Dr. Wei-Ping Li talk about the Taiwan information ecosystem and mis and disinformation.
Thanks for Silver Center for inviting me here. This is an honor. My name is Wei-Ping Li, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Maryland, and I'm also a research fellow at the Taiwan Fact Check Center. And thanks, Eva, for bringing us very positive note. But I have to apologize that I maybe have to bring us down a little bit. Disinformation researcher always acts like a Cassandra. When people are happy, they appear saying, there's something that you don't see. And so today, I'm going to talk about the role of information and the false information play during the budget session. So my conclusion, I'm going to say my conclusion first. I think this is a test for Taiwan's information system. But unfortunately, I think this session, this budget cut also reveals some weakness about Taiwan's information system. And I will tell you why. So first of all, I want to just kind of a review of Taiwan's false information challenges. As many of you have known, Taiwan has encountered a lot of disinformation attacks from overseas, especially from China. However, not many people mention that actually Taiwan also face false information problems from inside. There are a lot of false information producers who are also Taiwanese. And who are they? They are politicians. They are supporters of these politicians. They are influencers. And also, no offense to our media friends here, many media outlets also play important roles in spreading or creating false information. So, but of course, we also have organizations to defend our information systems, such as fact-checking organizations. We have a Taiwan Fact-Check Center, which I work with. We have Michael Penn. We have COFAX also, I think it's affiliated with Drilling V, right? And we also have Asia Fact Check Lab. Asia Fact Check Lab is quite new, and actually it's a branch under Radio Free Asia. And it focused more on the false information spread among overseas Chinese communities, like the information on X or on Weibo or on Xiaohongshu, etc. So let's switch the focus back on the 2025 budget cuts. So Tom has provided a very detailed introduction of this budget bills. And so I want to also mention that this debate about this budget had already started in 2024, mostly focusing on defense budget. So on January 21st, 2025, after a very, very, very long discussion and voting, and the budget bills finally passed. So there are a lot of things that have been cut, and since Tom has already mentioned that, as I want to repeat that again. However, because these budget bills are so complicated, and the discussion has stretched for such a long time, so this provides a very good environment for the birth of the false information. So Taiwan fact checkers have faced a lot of information, like information flood, and as I said, the information content is so complicated. It covers such wide categories, and it involves the procedures, legislation procedures. I mean, I study law, but I don't study the procedures, which is very complicated. Only very professional people would lawyers or law scholars would focus on that category. And also the spread of false information is so quick, and so fact checkers are kind of, it's so difficult for them to fact check those information. And I also will mention about availability of tools, but I will mention it later. So as you see, people are also very uh, care about the budget cut. This is so different from previous years. And why this year people became so interested in the budget cut? I think one of the reasons is that people kind of worry that the Chinese government will try to exert their influence through some pro-China legislators to kind of, for example, downgrade our national defense capacity. It's because of this kind of worry, which make people really want to watch what these legislators do and to watch what these legislators talk. So, of course, a lot of false information um, are spreading at that time, and this is from our platforms because users or readers of Taiwan Fact Check Center and the COFAS can report the information that have encountered back to our platform and ask us to fact check those information so we can count how many pieces of rumors, suspicious rumors that we have received. So from November 1st, 2024 to February 2025, we have received 839 pieces of false information, suspicious rumors that ask us to fact check. Comparing with the false information spread in other events, this is very high number. So the most common categories of this false information are those that are very relevant to people's life. For example, welfare or government services. For example, the application of the passport, will the budget cut affect those services? And also disease preparation and prevention, such as vaccine. Um, so I have a couple of examples, but due to the restraint of time, so I'll just mention this example. So there was a false claim saying that farmers over the age of 65 would lose their long-time benefits from the government if there was a budget cut. And so this is a graphic that is spread widely online. And this graphic specifically named the legislator who proposed the budget cut. Her name is Zhang Jiajun, and she is a legislator of the opposition party, KMT party. And the graphic said, this is Zhang Jiajun. She made those old farmers who cannot get their benefits. But this was actually an incorrect claim because this legislator, she did propose this bill. However, she didn't want the benefit itself to be cut. She just wants the operational expenses associated with distributing benefits to be cut. So this information on the graphic actually incorrect characterize this information, the bill. And the most important of all is that this bill was actually withdrawn by this legislator. It was not even presented onto the voting stage. But you can see that this is why the false information is so confusing because the language was very simple and it just omitted a lot of detailed information. And this kind of very simple language can trigger people's emotion without really trying to verify the information. So this is another example, but I'm not going to talk here. This this false information actually targeting the DPP party. And this information, I think, is distributed by KMT supporters. They're trying to correct facts with flawed information. And we also have the rumors that exploiting current events. There was a celebrity who died because of flu, unfortunately, in Japan. And so some rumor taking advantage of this event, saying that, wow, it's important to have a vaccine against the flu. However, the budget cut would affect government's ability to purchase those vaccines. So it would affect people's health. So there are so many false information pieces, and you might ask, who are those who create this false information? Our observation is that in this particular event, the budget cut, the false information mostly from domestic Taiwanese producers. We didn't see signs that the information was propagated by China. I think one of the reasons is this, because the budget cut is too complicated. We don't even understand that. I mean, Chinese have to take a lot of more time to know which point they can exploit. And another feature of this false information is the graphics. Taiwanese like to use graphics to explain things because it makes message more easier for people to understand. However, when you use simple languages to explain things, as I said, you just ignore a lot of important details, especially in a budget cut, because it requires a lot of information to explain this budget cut well. If you just use graphic, you just you can mischaracter a lot of information. So even some rumors, they just present fact, but they just present partial facts. And the partial fact is still incorrect information. Okay, so the voting session of the budget, it stretched like 20 hours. And legislators talk a lot during the session. And our legislative Yuan is very transparent. They have a video. So if you want the information to verify, you can find a video and to find the information you need. However, the problem is it's a 20-hour video, right? So it's really tough for our fact checkers to verify the information. Fortunately, we have partners. We have a civil society. And so we, in Taiwan Fact Check Center, we worked with reader, like Xiaowei just mentioned. It's a platform media, digital media focused on data journalism, and they parse out all the bills, the content of the bills, the progression of the bills. So it's very helpful for our fact checkers to look for the information they need. And also there is a company called Open Fund. Open Fund use AI. Oh, it's around this company. Great. Okay, so Open Fund uses AI technology to transcribe these videos. So it makes things so much easier for our fact checkers. They don't have to listen to the 20-hour video. However, it's still a challenge. So, so if you ask me if Taiwanese successfully resisted the false information during the session, I will answer you with a very complex facial expression, because there are still so many rumors spreading on the platforms, and even fact checkers feel overwhelmed. So you can imagine like the average person's how they feel when facing so much information. People people feel very difficult to process. And at this time, what would you do when you face a lot of information that you cannot process? You embrace your ideology. You trying to believe this information by what you believe. And so at the end of the day, the truth is still blurred. The facts is still buried under those false information. So you can see that if you observe the conversations on the social media, you can see that people still debate and they did present the evidence, but the evidence are still the evidence they believe, which is not really accurate. So this is a challenge. This is a vulnerability for Taiwanese society, which is that we face more and more information, and we judge the information according to what we want to believe, according to our identities and our ideologies. And I also want to point out another vulnerability in Taiwanese society, which is the mainstream media. People often say that, well, Taiwan is really good at resisting false information. They mentioned about the fact-checking initiatives. However, mainstream media plays a very, very important role still in Taiwan's information system. And during the budget session, we didn't see most media outlets provide us with very valid reporting or very in-depth investigation to portray the big pictures or to provide more contextual information. Fact-checking can only provide pieces of the information or to fact-checking simple pieces of facts, but it's media's responsibility to provide people with the whole picture. And this is something we didn't see in this this budget session. But I have to say that the reporter Bao Dao still did a very good job. But in addition to that, I think we can expect more from our mainstream media. And if we don't address this vulnerability in the future, in many other events, we will still see this kind of very chaotic information system. So yeah, thank you. I hope I I didn't bring very pessimistic information, but yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for providing us with information about Taiwan's information ecosystem surrounding this current budget crisis. We'll move on to our Q&A session, but just to start us off, I'll ask a question as folks in the audience start thinking about some questions here. But some thorough lines that I picked up during the discussions of all the presenters include uh, vulnerabilities, whether that may be institutional vulnerabilities, media or information vulnerabilities, as well as civic participation vulnerabilities. How can we get folks mobilized to a common cause? And another is politicization, if that is politicization of government procedures, of budget, of more people being interested in the budget for this very acute period because of the implications from China or from other external or internal influences, but also politicization of the media, of information, politicization of international or good governance efforts, such as what Ipa mentioned of open parliament initiative being suspended at least after 2024. So to try to find an optimistic thread in this discussion, with these two kind of thorough lines through the discussion of politicization and vulnerabilities, what do you see are some silver linings as positive reactions or lessons learned that civil society is developing, either through the tech tools that Wei Ping mentioned, or if it's through involvement or encouragement of international partners, international arrangements. What are, or even what Tom had mentioned earlier about different electoral outcomes or the reform petition results can also manifest in a different timeline, perhaps, of what this budget crisis is spilling out to be. So is there a silver lining that despite these trends of politicization and vulnerabilities that we can observe that is being developed in Taiwan?
Since I was overly negative, I'll try to find something positive or a silver lining. I think the fact that we're having this discussion is a silver lining. So props to the Seeger Center for doing this, because I think this is still one of the only discussions publicly in the United States on this issue. So good for that. There's also like, while there's the issue with the media, I think like getting information about this, because the budget cuts were so stark. Like when you just Google budget cuts Taiwan, there's a lot, there's bad information, but there's also good information out there. And this isn't necessarily, we in the United States consider this under the radar because we have other things that we're thinking about, but this is not something that's like being hidden away. Like this is out in the open, it's transparent, it's happened. The EY and the Lai administration have been very clear on that. So while it is still a stark negative, like it's easy to collect the information needed about like the big picture. Now, like the nitty gritty, like if any of you ask me a question about what does the 15% cut for this mean, I have no idea. And I don't think really many people do until it actually, like someone tries to do something. It may just mean less of something. But I would just say the information out there is accessible. It is transparent. No one, not even the KMT and TPP, are trying to hide this. And I don't even know how they could if they wanted to.
I think the silver lining is that people still care. I think that's very important, right? If people don't care, and that means that there is a big problem with our democracy. And as Tom said, yeah, I think the information is still transparent, and we still have civil society to standing with us. And I know that although I blame a lot on mainstream media, I know there are journalists in mainstream media. They really want to do something, and they really are very dedicated journalists. And it's good that we still have these people. And I hope that we can have more opportunities for them because they are really excellent. And yeah, we still have those talents here in Taiwan.
Since I'm the most optimistic one here, I think the resilience of civil society in Taiwan is one hope we can count on, maybe, because the situation we're facing is really severe. But if we look back in history for the 40 years of democratic reform or progress, we can see that people just never give up. And I see participants' age is, we see young people participating in different movement more and more. I think that is something significant in the democratic progress in Taiwan. And another thing is we have international collaboration more and more. We have we have a hackathon held for 5 years with Japan, Korea, and Taiwan and Hong Kong before. And we're developing the alliance across East Asia and of course with America. I think that is important as well.
Yeah, the Face the Ocean hackathon, right? Yeah, the civic awareness and participation, I think, has been really encouraging for me to see last year with the Bluebird movement, largest social movement since Sunflower movement. One of the demonstrations, 100,000 participants were out in the streets, including me. So for having folks aware and discussing of it, I think is also another silver lining. So for our folks in the audience who've been waiting patiently, so please identify yourself, state your name and affiliation, keep to one question. And I'd like to first start if is there a student in the audience who'd like to raise a question, GW student or any other university, college around the area? No? Okay. Let's open up to our wider audience here. I see Susan over here.
Susan Lawrence with the Congressional Research Service. Thank you. That was a fantastic panel, all of you. I learned so much. You all talked about how difficult it is to get accurate information about what has just happened. Is there any kind of a central clearinghouse? Has anybody, civil society, put together a central clearinghouse of information about, what are the cuts, what affected, just details about what's happened in a kind of comprehensive form? And I guess, Thomas, you showed us specific numbers for lots of ministries. What's your source? Where are you getting your information for all of us who are trying to kind of get a handle on this? Thank you.
I had to look across a variety of different places. Like a lot of the Taiwanese media had a lot of good breakdowns of this in Chinese and in English. I didn't go the 20-hour video route. But yeah, I used primarily the news outlets that were reporting on this, and then decided based on their reputations and the numbers, because sometimes some of the numbers were different across sources. So I needed to make sure at least 2 or 3 sources were saying the same exact number. And one issue I found while preparing for this was some news outlets were using New Taiwan dollars when they meant US and vice versa. So they were not being clear. So I had to go back and make sure that my numbers were, again, at least 2 or 3 said something, because if you're a Taiwan outlet, you may just put the $sign, but then you're not specifying when you swap in your article about different dollar amounts. And I thought it was the first time I really saw that, but I think because there are so many different figures, I don't think it was intentional. I just think because this is such a complicated issue that they're just getting what they can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's talking about a platform so that present the information. It's the Reader, READR, that I'm talking about. It's online media, and they have a lot of they produce a lot of topics. And during this session, they build out platforms, so they parse out, they search all the information about the bills and to pull together this information so that you can see the categories of the information and the bill, how much has been cut, and the progress of this bill. And also you can vote if you like this cut or not.
Yeah, at first, because the information is flooded, it's a lot of proposals. It's like thousands of proposals. So the mainstream media, they have polarized headlines about budget cutting. And after a week or so, or 2 weeks, we have Reader. They use human resources to parse these open data document and put it online. But I think it's a collaborative effort to do, because they release the data, but we also need analysis for the data. And now we cannot see a thorough analysis essays from mainstream media. Maybe reporters. Yeah, maybe reporters, but it's not daily. It's not daily news. So because the information is a lot, that's what we got now. So the AI transcription is good for the 20-hour information online, and that is part effort from open source community. So hackers independent media, mainstream media, and scholars, they need to take turns to contribute to this complicated issue, I believe.
All right, thank you so much. We have Ben in the middle here.
Get pretty close here, but I'll just raise my voice. I was just wondering for Tom, and this maybe you may think an answer to because you have a law degree. What are the actual constitutional challenges that can be made to this legislation? Is any of it potentially, unlawful under the Constitution?
Yeah, that's.
Need to repeat that because it's.
Oh, he asked about the constitutional challenges that could be made to the bills passed. Yeah. So the reason that this is a constitutional crisis is because of the freezing of the constitutional court. So theoretically, any bill that comes out of the LY can be challenged in the constitutional court. And that's what happened last year with a lot of those bills that came out about like fining people if they were found to not cooperate with the LY or forcing the president to answer questions. They all were struck down by the Constitutional Court. But now there is a bill passed restricting what the Constitutional Court can do based on the number of people they have. So that's where we're at that point now. I don't know what happens next. And that's kind of what I got to, where who blinks first or who acts first, who does what to stop first. Like, does the LY or the KMT try to stop the Constitutional Court from convening despite the fact that they don't have the number of people legally now to operate? Does the Constitutional Court just do nothing until those people are, then any nominees are brought forth and passed? Because right now it seems the Lai administration and the EY have to nominate people to fill the slots in the court, and then the court can decide if these things are constitutional or not. And until that happens, in this scenario, these bills are law, and like the budget is the budget. The other path is the Constitutional Court goes rogue and says the bill constricting our behavior is unconstitutional. Oh, and also now that that's unconstitutional, we're going to rule on these other things. Now, the constitutionality of a budget cut, I don't know what they would do with that, because I don't think a budget cut has ever been challenged by in the Constitutional Court. So the fact that these are so stark, like you could argue like they affect national security or like food safety, public health, and the Constitutional Court may rule in that respect. But I don't know if the budget cut thing is actually like a constitutional crisis. The constitutional crisis is the restrictions on the Constitutional Court itself.
I think that Tom explains that really clearly. Yeah, I think the problem of the constitutional crisis is the Constitutional Court, which is actually very political. And there was a very ugly fight, I think in early January or in late February, late December, yes, last year. So politics.
And well, let's go over here. A gentleman in the brown jacket.
Hi, my name is Devin. I'm a recent graduate of the GW Law School and the Elliott School. And I did research in Taiwan for my grad school thesis. And I feel like I understand the difference between the KMT and the DPP, but I'm struggling to understand like the new TPP. I know it's like an independent party. It's more left of center. It's more popular with the youth, but I was wondering if you could explain the kind of wedge dynamic a little bit more detail about it and what their relationship is with China, because they seem to be really important in terms of what's holding all of this up.
Well, we're all confused, but I'll try to explain. TPP, originally they adopt the concept of transparency and efficient. So Ke Wen-je was elected by as a Taipei mayor when DPP cooperated with him, and then they started to become a new party attracted young people. And these young people, I would say it's the majority are overlapped with GovZero community, some of them, because they believe in technology and working with democracy. But they ended up not looking at facts. It's in my opinion, and they're in the middle. They want to be the key party to cooperate with the two sides. But now most people believe they are working partly or influenced by China influence, but it's not clear if it's true. It's like we cannot say we maybe can say KMT is influenced by China and they have some interest between KMT and TPP. But that is what we can see outside. They have kind of deal, but what is the deal? Why the new party leader Huang Guochang used to be the leader of Sunflower Movement fighting against China, but he is now the new leader. Just 2 weeks ago, become the new leader, the new leader of the party. So it's really a very strong feeling between Sunflower Movement crowds toward DPP because they used to work together. So it's still confusing for our Taiwanese.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, yeah, I'm very confused.
Yeah, and like they campaigned on like good governance and tried to bring in technocrats and that sort of thing early on. And like the China aspect, like when I talked to PPP party workers, um, the goal was to come up with a third way that wasn't KMT or DPP for cross-strait issues or cross-strait dialogue. Haven't seen it come out yet. So it's been almost a year since they've had like some level of influence, and then now the legal problems and all of those things that I think what the TPP campaigned at and what they've actually done are two very different things. So it's not going to be until the LY election comes up that we'll actually see how much backlash there is. We may see it in the midterms at the county levels if TPP people don't win major seats and mayoralships. But yeah, like everyone, I don't even think some people, like I think people who join the party or like work for the party and then what the party is now, it's very different. And like, I mean, every third party in Taiwan runs into this problem where it has that huge burst of excitement and then it is lucky if it gets to the next election. Like we saw it with Taiwan State Building Party, we saw it with the NPP. Now we have the TPP, and like this, I think the issues that the TPP are facing are much more significant given the legal aspect as well.
All right, great. We have just enough time for one more question. Garrett, right here in the middle.
Hi, my name is Garrett van der Wees. I'm teaching history of Taiwan at George Mason University. Thanks for an excellent session. I had a factual question for Thomas. The budget cut, does that also involve budget cut of the Legislative Yuan's own budget? Question mark.
I did not look into that one. I was only focused on the LY. But I don't know if either of you could answer that. But yeah, I didn't see any articles or anything really focused on that. And it may be because so much of the budget cuts were so stark in the EY. But I didn't look. I couldn't find anything.
Right. Then for Weiping, I understand you saying that the disinformation on the budget cuts were not initiated by Beijing. My sense, my feeling is that the whole budget cut basically came out of Beijing's pocket because it was initiated in the Legislative Yuan by delegations from the Kuomintang who just happened to have visited Beijing. So can you clarify that point a little bit? What role did Beijing/disinformation have on these budget cuts?
Yeah, so I mean that from the pieces, the first information that we have seen, that with the evidence that we have, we can see that it's from the Taiwanese politicians, most of them. But as you said, they might be, there are Chinese, there may be Chinese influence behind that, but we cannot evidence that, right? You have to have a very solid evidence to say they are the initiator. And I mean, from the things that we can see right now, they are most initiated by the politicians of KMT. And also, actually, GPP politicians, they also spread some incorrect information too. Yeah.
So I can add something to that. In a NGO called IORG is one of the GovZero participants started a NGO IORG. They compare the information from TikTok and some from PRC's platform and compare to the politicians from Taiwan's TikTok. They can see the relevance in a very short term of time. So that is kind of evidence to show the connection between Chinese influence to Taiwanese politicians. And they even have a chart to list top 10 Taiwanese influencer who use Chinese information to put into Taiwan's social media. So maybe you can check on IORG. They have daily or weekly reports.
And IORG also has some very good pieces on American skepticism debate in Taiwan and its development there. So please check out that resource. But with that, our event today comes to a conclusion. Thank you all so much for joining us for this discussion. And democracy is messy, but resilience of institution and its peoples are an important part to that. I know we had a lot of questions we couldn't get to, so if you wanted to ask our presenters any follow-up questions, please do, but otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us.